Hey everyone, good morning. Or afternoon, I guess, depending where you are. Oh, I didn't let anyone know on Discord. Just 1 second. I'm not going to be streaming on Discord today because I feel like whenever I do, it really drops the view count on here because people will just tune in on there and not on Twitch. And I know I didn't stream much during Ramadan, but I need to get those numbers back over 75, you guys. They've been consistently below 50 this past week. I have a lot of positions open, so that's why I honestly didn't really want to stream this afternoon or this morning, but I mean, we could go through like a general walkthrough. Like, this is pretty straightforward, to be honest with you, because our range is essentially hit, but where they pinned this yesterday at 70, 78, I would say is extremely calculated because these were the max core extensions, and this is kind of what can start getting you 107, 108, 103. Yeah, well, I'm an affiliate, but I'm not a partner. I was very close to becoming a partner. I think I was averaging like 71 to 80 to 90 views or something like that, but then I stopped streaming for a month when I was fasting, and now view count's pretty low. But I mean, it's only my first week back, so. Well, and my Twitter got hacked, so I guess that didn't really help. Thank you. I'm actually just like impressed that we actually hit these ranges. This is extremely calculated too, because so on the report we discussed basically like 71.22 to 28.32 break is what could lead to that 71.48. Them stalling this range in here in pre-market was pretty calculated. There is something I'll point out though. There was a little tiny offset, okay, like roughly 2 points, and we've seen this theme happen quite a bit this week. And I saw it this morning too, like when they kind of took this beneath the 71.20. Do you guys see this? Right around these ranges in here. So there were slight breaches this morning. They still closed above 71.20, which was pretty important, but I feel like these little tiny nuances are partially what's causing them to stall a little bit and have these crossovers. So by crossovers, I mean just slightly beneath 4.8 right here, just slightly beneath 4.7, or sorry, beneath 5.2 right here, beneath, or stalling 4.7 versus 4.9, breaching 20 and 2.1. And you can see that they did the same thing right here when they stalled 61.63, because usually to break out of the means you have to clear over 61. Usually it's 65 to 66, so they did the same thing here. Then they came back and pushed. Okay. Oh, Tesla's getting the break of 407. And then when they cleared 71.71, this was really good. Then they stalled for a little bit, but same sort of idea. I think once they get over the 7.6, 7.8 wall, then it should be a little bit more progressive. But the issue we're running into right here is the breaches beneath. Let me just delete these so I can show you guys. It's the breaches beneath 6.8 and 6.6. Do you guys see what I'm saying? You kind of want to get back above this line in here. You see how they're kind of just stalling this range in here, you guys? So 6.4 is okay. I think once they start basing above 6.4, that's when price action will be a little bit more progressive. What we don't want to see continue to happen are these breaches like this. Do you see this? This right here. You don't want to be coming back to this range in here if you're trying to get back to clear that 7.5 retest to potentially get back to 7.8, 8.1, 8.8. I had 71, 88, and 92 as the absolute max range for the week that I put out on Wednesday on the occurrence that they clear the 71, 48, 58 ranges. So we're obviously getting very close to that. Is this enough range, you guys think, to be considered a max range for the session today? I think so, right? But what's one huge factor right now? Don't get this wrong, because you guys never get this specific question right for some reason, which is strange. Time. Okay, so do we still have a lot of time left in the session today? And we are on our 2-day, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the 5th bar. When do you typically start hitting major exhaustion or expansion scenarios on patterns like this? So you can start as early as the 6th, right? Most often the 7th. So could these areas continue to expand us over the next 2 to 3 days? Yes, right? And specifically like them breaking core ranges. So, and you could normally see whether or not they're going to exhaust or expand based on like the prior bar. So even the 4th bar, okay, this was 138 to 133 points in range, which is above our 132 intervals, right? So 132 is our 132 by 2, or 128 by 2 is our 256, right? Though that shouldn't say times 256, it should say times 2 equals 256. So I could already tell that they were wanting to push range based on the 4th bar, because usually you'll exhaust expand on the 4th, 6th, 7th. And I figured we could likely apply the same range. Have we already hit 128 points in range on our 5th candlestick here? So basically, have we hit 256 points? Do you understand what I'm saying? 71.76 is huge, guys. That's the 256 point range from the 4th bar low on that 2-day to these current highs. Okay. Is 71.76 off 4th bar cycles. Do you see why they're probably stalling there? Do you see why this area is likely going to be super heavy if they clear, and how it could expand us? It's not just expanding core ranges, you guys. It would be expanding wider intervals. That's why 71, 76, 78, 81, okay, 71, 81.25 is the full 256 point range off that 69.25 opening range on that 2-day. Which, again, just in case you guys forgot, these were our April 13th, 14th open closing price. Is the 14th and 13th, are those important dates for us? Even on a wider scale. Yes. Okay, so measuring ranges off these specific dates, I would say is very important, because this is how we can have a pretty good idea on whether or not market wants to fully extend to like those 346, 420 point intervals. Off lows from March 31st, they've already moved the exact ranges we talked about on Wednesday and on Sunday. 71.83 is the 256 point interval off the 13th close, okay, which was that what was it? 69.27.50, this area here. Okay, 13th close, 256 points. So this area, roughly this area, okay, here. And I don't want to go over this too much in real time, just because I don't want to miss anything here, but you see how crucial it was for them to hold. And I knew as soon as they started basing above 6.4 that they'll try to come back and clear these highs again. So this period right here, about the time when I started the stream, you really need to hold 6-4, okay? When they come and take out 7-4, 7-5, how crucial is it that they test 7-1, 7-6, 2-5 on the first attempt? We know that these areas are extremely calculated. Very, okay? Because that's what could allow for those extensions, expansions, so on and so forth. If we're looking at this on just like a daily frame, we've already decided that the market's likely moving in like the 410, 420 intervals. The actual intervals are closer to 426 and 413 based off that 13th measurement. And we talked about them moving in these increments back on March 27th when we were preparing for the potential bottom on the 31st and the 1st. But these are also these ranges. Do you guys see what I'm saying? These are huge spots. So they're not just the 256. They're also those 410, 20 point intervals off the March 31st lows. Okay, just as a reminder, because you guys probably forgot. These are the 413, 426 point intervals off lows. Okay. Oops. I think it's this one here. Okay. Do you see the confluence there? And it's actually a bit higher than that. That's why I would say once they start getting over 7188, okay, 92, do you see why these areas could be huge? Okay, because it would essentially be taking out that full range. Kind of like this here. Okay. So these areas are pretty important, honestly. The 81, 82, 84. That full range, I think we said, was closer to 7208, 7193, which I know, like, I know these areas seem insane, but remember when I talked about us getting to 7120s and 7180s on Sunday? And I said I'm probably going to sound absolutely insane, but this is what could happen if they keep these ranges, and specifically if they meet conditions on the 13th, okay? And the 13th gap down wasn't even a bad gap down because they still gapped it at core areas, right? So the 67, 70s, and they held. We also figured that 81 point differential from open close back in here, or 83.75, would play a huge role in how they trade things. And so far that's played out to be pretty true. So like if you, it's kind of hard to see now that I have all these on here, but I have alerts set, but just remind me just in case I miss it. Because I did have some odds right now, which is why I started the stream right now. Okay. Right here. Do you guys see this on the 13th? Remember how I said that they fully offset that? This was a really calculated area for them to take this to that day, okay? And look at where they stalled. It was actually pretty insane because they basically hit almost exact range. And that was right off our 68.46 spot, okay? So once they came back and kind of cleared that 2.8 area, and that was basically exactly where they stalled highs. Do you see this? So these areas they're not just our core spots, they were also pretty calculated based on the kind of ranges and intervals they were moving in, especially in terms of like highs and lows. And if you kind of use this throughout the week, you can see it. Do you see what I'm saying? Look at the 7004, 7008. Do you see what I'm saying in terms of highs, lows, open, close? I haven't used it above here yet, but I was curious to see what these areas could potentially net to. And I wonder if they net close to, oh yeah, they do. That's insane, actually. I'll be sure to include this on the report because we talked about this on Monday and on Sunday, but I haven't looked at it since to continue using this, but that's actually very, very, very accurate. So we probably could use that same sort of scenario right here in terms of expansion. So once they kind of took it above 71.61, do you guys see what I'm saying? And that's the area that I was just saying we probably don't want to come back beneath the means. It makes sense using the weekly ranges too, okay? Do you see that? What was yesterday's highs? 71.89. So 71.89, probably this area here. 7173. So 7160 to 61. And I'll explain what I'm talking about in a second here. Based off open, close, highs, lows, okay? 7139. That essentially means you have to hold the 6061 spot here. That's pretty crazy accurate, actually. And then clear the 7376. That basically gets you out of those weekly gapped ranges. Does that make sense? So, long story short, what could that end up doing for you? Try not to get this wrong. What could that mean? If they did something like that. Just using like a very base theory from the week, which I figured could be a trend. And right now I can see that based on whether or not they hold 6-1 and 6-4. I already wanted them to hold 6-1 and 6-4, but this makes a lot more sense now why they would have to probably hold that too. Why do you guys think that would make sense? Or which areas do you think that could lead this to? Based off, and these are not major measurements, they're just ways of kind of understanding how things gapped for the week. So it's basically fulfilling its weekly gap ranges on a day-to-day, intraday basis. What could that mean? I think that's what that could mean, is probably getting up to the 7200s. Like the 7240s could be in correlation with this. Okay. And likely off like the weekly ranges or any time that's linked with the 10th and 13th. So this for the 21st. We used our 7-day quite a lot in the past, the 22nd, 23rd. And obviously our 10-day, which runs till the 28th, we've been working with an 8.5-day frame, which you obviously can't see, but the way that we measured that was essentially from the 31st or the 1st through these time intervals here. And I guess you could manually measure that if you want to, but it was roughly 8.5 days. Okay, so kind of like right in here. And there's some crossovers, okay? So those flips would occur on the 21st. So I would say that the 21st is very important in terms of structure. Plus, that's the median frame between the 14th and the 28th, I think we said. Okay, let's look at this now on an intraday basis, because we're hitting some pretty big spots here. Overnight conditions also worked out really well. I had put those out last night that I didn't want us to come back beneath 70.71. We did a really good job holding this area here. I wanted us to retest our 70.81, 84 spots. Ideally get back into the zone, so 70.88 by London session. London session is between the 3 and 4 window here, so that was perfectly timed. And try getting the breaks of 71.20s. Obviously, they did a lot of this overnight, which could have taken away from some of our real-time ranges, because they easily could have had a different break this morning where like maybe they didn't fully push 71.48, but then that would have given us, the way that you can think about that is them not pushing 71.48 or something this morning, and maybe instead only getting to 71, let's say 71.20, just to keep it simple. Okay. Just be careful here, guys, because these are pretty big spots. You should have covered at least something in the 70s, just FYI. So this range in here, let's say, okay? And technically we could maybe even use today's real-time open since it was 71.21, because 71.21.22 was our target anyway, but just to kind of give you guys an idea. Okay. had they not continued to push here in the pre-market, the range that we would have likely seen, so let's say instead they stalled at 71.22. Okay, let's just assume they stalled 71.22 pre-market versus 71.47. You have to kind of understand like the differential in ranges. So had they done something like that, do you see how that could have given us an odd of coming back to 70.94, 70.88, basically a zone protection? I need you guys to understand this from both ends of the trade. So this would be the scenario if they didn't get the 40s in pre-market and instead they only got 71.22.28 or something like that. Does that make sense? Full range, you could have also looked at it as the actual range that occurred on the downside, which this was very important, by the way, because they held 32 points. Could 32 points, could that have expanded us if they broke beneath these areas? Yes, right? And that's what would have caused a 66 to 68 point reversal, which would have basically taken us back to yesterday's close at 78. So another way of looking at this is these areas here. You have to see how they correlate. So had they stalled and failed this morning, they likely would have pushed this down to 70.90 max. This max should be close to our 70.87, 70.86 zone. Okay? Just put this here. So what could that mean for us in terms of ranges? What do you guys think this implies? Let me clear this so it's a bit easier to see. What do you guys think this would imply? And I'm measuring specifically off 2-1 because that was our spot anyway. You could use the real-time open if you want, just to kind of keep things, I guess, a bit more precise, but what could that mean? And this is very, very important that you try understanding this in terms of range. Which area is a very big overhead here based on that? So I was thinking like 26.5 seemed the most accurate based off our ranges. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you guys understand this concept? And these are off calculated ranges. So basically off our 71.20, 71.21. I'm using where they actually stalled, which was here. And let me draw this out in a better way for you guys, because this way you could see what the scenarios could have been. So on a downside, this would have made total sense. What were our max ranges for yesterday? 70.88, 70.91, 70.92. This is pretty insane because that's exactly what these areas would have potentially netted, okay? And if we measure them off the actual lows or highs that occurred, then you can clearly see that they would have potentially netted that 70.92, 70.95, and then max 70.90 area in here. So that being said, which area has to clear? Let's make this blue. Which area has to clear to see any sort of extensions or expansions? And I'm just making this colored because I feel like people, for some reason, understand better this way. But do you see what I'm saying? Just as a very, very base approach. It's good to understand what your scenarios could be based on where you open and where you close. So can we conclude that 71, 74, 73 is a pretty big spot for us to clear this afternoon? We just looked at it in multiple ways. Okay, so it's the 256 point range, it's the 426 point range. Yes, it is. Okay, what about timing perspectives? What do you guys think in terms of timing? Look at that single stick here. 71, 74, 50 being tested. These are huge areas for ES. Let me mark the 7-4. That has to be news on that stick. I was going to say timing. Pretty important times coming up. What do you guys think? That was the next step that we were moving on to. What's coming up here in the next half hour? Midday, right? So if they start clearing ahead of 12, 12:30, how much higher are your odds of actually seeing a full-blown continuation for the second half of the day today? And by that, I'm talking about 71.88, 71.92, 71.99, 7200, 72.08, those areas that we talked about as expansions. Yeah, a lot higher. Something that we could utilize, you guys, is the timing for when they cleared right here. Do you guys see this? Okay, there's two ways we can look at this. This timing here, it's like roughly 22, 23 minutes from when they actually cleared 2-1, okay, to the highs, versus the timing that they stalled to the open. Roughly around 19 to like 23 minutes. We could use those to our advantage. What does that mean? So mid-session usually is around that 12:30, 12:48 period. What could that entail for us? You guys think? We could likely see some early breaks, right? Especially considering the fact that they push these early on in pre-market. Okay? The first spot we have to clear is the 71, 75, 76 area. Okay, followed by our 78, 81. What did I say that spot was? How did it get deleted? I just put this on here. So I think it was 7183.75 or something. And I haven't had time to fully measure ranges off open, close, highs, lows, like just because it's been just a core break, but we've already broken the 52-point intervals here. Does that make sense? When you move in core ratios, what kind of ratios do you move in? And don't get this wrong, okay? Because we've gone over this a lot this past week. Here you go, okay? Apply these to today's session. So right now, we're basically moving in, I don't know why Twitch does that. Why does it just copy everything in one big lump? Here, let me send them as separate messages, okay? So we're hitting about mid-range right now, technically, from open, right? What's been the theme this week? We've been hitting around mid to full, so usually around the 72, 75, 78, and then there's been the odd times where we had the full expansion. Okay, so off of today's open, we're basically already at midpoints, okay? Do you see what I'm saying? Off of lows, do you see this? So this is another form of confluence that we're going to talk about. But this can really help us in terms of understanding intraday range. If we look at this from our 70, 78 close, which is obviously a core area. That means we're getting very, very close to extending max ratios from yesterday's close, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see that? That could get you that zone entry at 71, 87, 88. I would imagine that that would mean that there's probably going to be some overhead around 7193, 92. Okay. This is off yesterday's close. 70, 78 core ratio is maxed. What way can we look at this for confluence? So we can probably see whether or not maybe off today's lows and off of overnight lows or something, if these hit the secondary ratios. Do you see what I'm saying? So the 72, 75, 76, 78, we have to see if there's alignment, okay? Does that make sense? This is off the actual lows that are occurring. Off of today's opening range, these should be around 72 points. So, which area has a lot of confluence for us today on this session? Based on what we're seeing here. And we can measure off the actual overnight lows that occurred too, but they're all going to be very, very close. So let's just go like this. Off close. Okay, this is like the 107. This is the 107. They're basically almost the same, so I mean, it doesn't really matter. You could use either or for today's open, yesterday's close, but you should be able to see the confluence around these areas here, okay? And then specifically if you apply the actual real-time ranges right now too. And this is so easy to do when it's a core-to-core break. It just makes it that much easier to actually work with. Okay, currently we already are hitting a core ratio from the prior day's close. Do you see what I'm saying? This is exactly 115 points being broken here. So usually when that happens, you can push 132, 128 points. Is there confluence from that too? From yesterday's close? Prior day, not prior day's open, prior day's close. I'm talking about the 16th open and 15th close. Offer 70.57. Yes. Okay. So that's also 128, 132 points from April 15th, 16th, close, open. Okay. AK offers 70.55, 70.58 calculated ranges. So, I'm asking you guys, which area has the highest confluence for the session today? And specifically if they want to fully expand or extend this above 71, 75, 76. We already know that this area is huge. But which area has the secondary range in confluence? Like we already know that between 71, 75 and 78 and 81 and 83 and 84, there's a lot of confluence. But which area has the most confluence? No, 86 is too low. You guys, I just showed you guys this. What do you mean? I just sent you guys 7 different formats of how this area is important. Closer to the 90s, 71.91, 71.93, okay? 71.90s has highest confluence on breaks of 71.75. Okay? okay, sorry. I'll let that slide this time. And then I did notice a lot of confluence around the 72.08.09, but mainly if they like fully extended range. I feel like, honestly, that this could be probable because of how much time we have. And specifically if they actually start breaking range early. So kind of like what I was saying before, they technically have some odds to start breaking just after 12 here. And we can clearly see how heavy 71, 74, 75 is, right? And we know how crucial it is to hold this 59 and 61 spot that we talked about earlier, which they're doing a really good job of, by the way, so far. So we know which areas have to clear, but we also know which areas have to sustain, because if they fail to come back, or if they fail to clear this range in here and then they come back to this range in here, this is where volatility would increase. Do you guys agree? And then that is what would make this a pinnable session. Okay, kind of like what happened yesterday. Do you guys want a pinnable session for the second half of the afternoon today? No. I mean, I don't, but we could also use these here for some timing aspects today. Let's take a quick peek. 211. Sorry, this chart's insane. I think we had some flips right now on some of the structures that are directly correlated with lows. Okay, so 422. This flips at 306. So there's a lot of confluence around 306. Do we have any catalysts after 3 o'clock today? 309. I would document 306, 309 p.m. .312 p.m. 3:18 p.m. These seem like the better odds to try clearing. So, I mean, they at least tested 7.5 during this period, but no clearance breaks. So, I wonder if we apply those same logics here. If they align with that 1208. Yeah, they do. That's pretty insane, you guys. That's crazy. So 1208 is extremely calculated. 306, no one wrote them down. 306 to, what did we say? 306. Well, let me scroll. 309, 312. 306, 309, 312. 3:18 p.m. extremely calculated times for session today in correlation to session lows. This period of, so let me explain this from a time perspective, okay? These periods of time are directly linked to overnight lows, okay? These periods of time are linked to those lows too in terms of creating highs and breaking that overhead, which they did technically break. So I would say if they had stalled 7374 fully and never tagged it, then those odds are off. This is where I made it a little bit different, where I'm using these specific ranges of time based off my calculated spots. Does that make sense? So like my calculated areas being the 7148 and obviously the 7120 spot, okay, or 21 spot. And just seeing like the point in time when they finally cleared that, how long that duration took. Okay, so from this is where I'd consider them clearing it right here. Does that make sense, you guys? That was approximately 24, 23 minutes. So the logic I'm using here is I want to see off these stalls if they can hold, which you see how they're holding there? That's pretty insane. And to see if they could push during these intervals here. These are calculated frames of time. Does that make sense? So they really have to try pushing the 71, 76 at these points here. That's insane. Can someone document this in Discord just for the exact open close those candles here, because this is what could keep us durational until at least that 3 o'clock period. We can, I guess, mark 1209 here too. So these are calculated core times to core intervals based off clearing core. Does that make sense? And then I also applied another metric from the time that they stalled to open. So I think that was close to like 19 minutes or something like that. And from a based theory, mid-session is usually between 12:30, 12:45. This is what I looked at earlier. I figured maybe they end up clearing like a little bit earlier than that this afternoon, which lands us at the same time. Isn't that crazy? So there's two ways of looking at this. So lots of confluence around this period of time right here, guys. This is recorded too if you want to go back and study this. It's just an interesting way of looking at the market. Another way that you can look at this too is maybe to see where they held the real-time lows as like some extensions. So maybe see if they, from the 12:45 period, if we have some alignment there too, and 12:48. Do you see what I'm saying? They should align to that 12:08 period too, off the actual lows that occurred. Do you see that? Let me delete this so you guys can see. Do you see that? This is from the clearance of the 20 to the real-time lows. And then measured off the mid-session. This is mid-session. 12:45 is mid-session. So it kind of gives us an idea of how early they can clear ahead of mid-session. Mid-session. I did my best to explain that. Obviously, if you guys have questions, you can ask, but the issue is no one ever asked me questions, which is crazy because other people are like, they like refuse or don't like being asked questions. I encourage questions and no one asks me any questions. It's insane. I almost have to bully people to answer questions sometimes. Huge times of day. I wonder if we get some crazy news. Imagine they rip this to like 71.88 at those points in time to give us like the full extension or something like that. That would be absolutely insane. So we really have to document these points in the day here. Let's see what happens. I always get very excited for calculated periods here. 12:08, 12:09 calculated times. Do we have any catalysts at noon? I didn't even check. I didn't think we had the Fed speaker at 2, I think, right? Because this is my time zone. Does Trump speak at 12 Eastern time or 12 my time? Because if it's 12 my time, that's 2. And this stupid thing always updates my time zone for some reason. Is it Trump at 12 or 2? Because if it's at 12, then this thing reset the time zone again. 12:15's, yeah, I see that, but I don't know if this is set to Eastern time or Mountain time. Okay, so then that is 12. So that's pretty crazy then. We could definitely get some news. But you guys see how the time aspect of it is so correlated to when they're putting these speakers on? Just anyone that's listening, just in general. Like, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that. This is why I don't believe anything happens as like a coincidence, especially because these areas are huge. So we know that these areas could expand us. Let me pull up my news feed. Hold on, I don't have it pulled up. Look, 71.78 break at 12:08. That is absolutely insane. You guys, someone document that, because that is crazy. That means that they could start pushing those ranges here ahead of 12:30, 12:45. I need to shut my screen off for a second, guys. I need my other screen. Hold on. Sorry. No, they're not because it's OPEX though too, so you have to keep that in mind. That's why holding long off yesterday was probably the better move. Remember yesterday when I said yesterday's premiums were dead, so buy the next day? And that would make sense too, especially if they start burning them um, uh, for OPEX. It kind of all like correlates to one another, if that makes sense. Sorry, I just want to take some of my position off just in case. I'm not saying that you guys have to do that. I'm just saying that I'm streaming, obviously, so sometimes I get extremely distracted, so I don't want to miss any sort of exits or anything like that. Okay, I took 2 contracts off here, which is probably bad timing to do that, to be honest, but I don't want to miss something or have some news come out, just in case. That volatility on that stick. So they triggered 7178.25 to the exact penny. You can see the reduction off the 1209 stick. How much reduction did they give on that stick in total? 4 points. 4 points. So that should give us odds around our 81, 82 spots. Overall reduction is 4.75. See if they quickly negate this. They should align with our 81, 82, 83. Okay. Oh, SPY did hit 711. I had bought the 710s this morning. Okay, we have to document these spots because 1208, 1209. Sorry, guys. You have to give me like another few minutes. Trying to position properly. I rolled some of the calls into Monday. I covered just a tiny bit just in case. I only have one contract left from the calls we bought yesterday, which obviously those ones are up a lot, but I just want to hold the one just in case we get that move, because obviously that one I can leverage a lot more. But the ones I bought this morning off 71.20s, I took some off. But the ones I bought off 71.48 break are the ones that I'm trying to figure out exactly what to do here. Because obviously that's kind of a risky spot, you know, like especially if they break this. Like these ones down here, I'm not as concerned, but 71.48, those were the 710s I took. I don't know what to do with these. I took 2 off, and I don't know. Like rolling those ones doesn't make sense. I rolled the ones that I bought up 71.20s. You know, maybe I'll just set a stop and leave those. Because the premiums are not moving as great on those as obviously the earlier ones I took. You know, like this, like the 705, 708s, like these ones were a little bit cleaner, but the 710, 711s are a little bit harder off those points here, and especially off the 71, 78. I think I'll wait until mid-session. Do you guys see the common theme here? So something I've noticed is, let me turn my screen back on, hold on. Something I've noticed is whenever they're, where's my Twitch screen? Whenever they're pulling back, they're shortly after they just trigger these spots. So I lost those points in time here that we looked at earlier, but they were around this point here. And remember how, I think it was 11:35:36, wasn't it, that we looked at earlier? They meet the specific points in price, but then they stall. Okay, so kind of like what they did here, and same thing that they're doing right here. So, and then they pull back. And why do you think that is? Versus just having a straight continuation. Why do you guys think that is? Because I know for a fact if they would have cleared over 78, they would have for sure pushed 81, 83. Why do you think that this is a common theme today? That they're meeting specific points on time, but they're not clearing them. But what factors into that specifically today? Aside from time. Yeah, but what do you guys think would play a huge factor specifically today? And think about it in terms of premiums and how they're trading. Exactly. So and the price action in itself and the timing aspect in itself and the price it's triggering at those times, they all make sense because if they would have cleared here, they could have pushed, right? That would have obviously pushed premiums. They're intentionally like moving premiums in that way. Does that make sense? Because a lot of that is factored in to obviously today being OPEX. Isn't that kind of cool though when you think about it like that? Especially because these points in time are linked to lows, highs, open, close. Mm-hmm. But that this is how they're doing it. And if they would have cleared these areas, then we knew that they could extend, expand. But that's the way that they're trying to burn premiums, even though they're meeting their price points. Does that make sense? I know it's kind of like a weird way of looking at it, but from a time and price approach, that's exactly how they're doing this. Okay? When can they really start actually moving premiums though? And that's why I was saying yesterday, if you want to play tomorrow, I would just buy. Yesterday was a terrible time to day trade in the afternoon when I said it was pinnable after they stalled 70.81, 88, right? And I did say yesterday, I would take tomorrow's expiration, not today's, because one, you're going to get killed in premiums, and two, tomorrow's OPEX. So even if they end up giving us our spots, if they push it overnight, you might have some difficulty actually capturing some of that break. Okay. And it made sense because they also held our 70, 58, 59, 61 spots yesterday. But mainly to prevent that premium decay. Yeah, and not trading same day expiration. But like I said, I would have started fresh if they closed in the means yesterday, but because they closed at core, these were my thoughts yesterday. So I'm not going to just say that, oh, we're not going to do anything because it's OPEX. No, that's not how the market works. Okay, so this kept full range in play, which is now extending us to the 71, 71, 78, 80, 88. But in the terms of premium burn, this is how they're doing it in real time today. While still hitting our price targets, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but it makes sense to me. So core closes yesterday meant 70, 71, 78, so on and so forth. Another reason why they're likely stalling like this each time by a point or two or three is what? I would say probably the 70, 78 pin versus 70, 81, 70, 84. That could also be a contributing factor because remember how I said yesterday if they close above 70, 81, that's going to give us the highest odds of bullish price action, like continued clearance breaks. I think that also contributes to how it's trading this way. Does that make sense? Kind of like the stalls here. Okay, this would have pushed here. These things are what would have reduced odds of premium decay today, especially if they, how many, what? Remember what I was telling you guys yesterday, like 7081, 7084 pins, those give better odds, not of continuation, but of better PA. Okay, so more constructive price action. And this is what I mentioned this morning, but this would have been in our best interest because that's going to give us the most aggressive PA. Okay? So what do you guys think? Meeting the 71, 78 price point at exactly 12:08 p.m. calculated point. Do you think that keeps this extended till mid-session? What do you guys think? Why have I not done a poll, actually? Max ranges for session today. 71, 78, 71, 81, 71, 83, 71, 86, 71, 88, 71, 93, 7200 plus. I'm going to set that to 5 minutes just to see what you guys think. Yeah, and it's mid-session. And right beneath 71, 78. Like, none of that is a coincidence. Can you guys vote on the poll, please? By the way, if they take out 7200, the spots are closer to like 7206, 7208, 7210. Obviously, mass expansions would be like 7222, 32. I don't know if they give us that today. I feel like that's kind of excessive. Like, if they're going to do that, they'd probably save it for like 6th, 7th bar ranges for next week, not this week. But I guess with a catalyst, that could move price. The thing is they don't always need a catalyst to move price if the price is already met. Right? So that's part of the issue. Which is why sometimes you see reactions on news and sometimes you don't. Like, notice sometimes they'll announce a ceasefire and then the market will go insane, and other times it won't even do anything. It's because it's relative to whether or not the price has already been factored in. Let's get, so a lot of you guys are voting 71, 78, 71, 81. So a lot of you think that highs are in before mid-session occurring. Tesla, by the way, too, is getting back to that 407 mark. we should probably also calculate the median points here. So between here and that 1208, 178. Wonder what the 178 looks like. 178. So like 89 minutes. Oops. I just want to see something. 246. Let's just mark these. I did notice some really nasty looking potential star reversals like this that could form after that 3 o'clock period, which could be a sell-off into the close. Hence, like, I think there's a heavy importance. Like, you know how I said 306, 309 are important? It's not just important based on time, it's important based on price and structure. So those structures look very bad if they don't continue upside between like 1208 and 3 o'clock. Does that make sense? They're breaking exactly at 1230. Can someone document that, please? 1230 getting that clearance break above 70, 78 high of day. And right at 1230, 7181 to 7183 is the calculated area. So let's see if they can try triggering 8-1 over these next 7 to 8 minutes. So our timing so far has been spot on. 12:08 p.m., 12:30 p.m. I want to just see what these median ranges are in here though. Mid-session is closer to 12:40, 12:45, you guys, okay? So testing at 12:30, it doesn't necessarily need 71.87 or 71.81 or 71.83, but it at least needed to try breaking highs, okay? So all that was really required for this time was, honestly, even if it were to hit 79, that still would have been okay. These are some of the median intervals here, and they're close to our 136, 137 time frame. So I'm just marking these because these are obviously important. These are in correlation to our 106, 109 times of day, okay? Once the premiums take out highs, then I know that mid-session could be progressive, where they can actually start clearing these ranges. 71.81 triggered. I don't know if I have one set at 8.3. Something else I wanted to see here was this. So yeah, roughly like 90, 89 to probably half of 189, like 94 minutes. So this period here is the mid part of this period, around 136, 137, 140. This is the median part of the 1208 to 306 session. So this is going to give us an idea on whether or not they're going to just continue this afternoon, or if we're going to be at some major risk of a sell-off after 3 o'clock, okay? Or maybe as early as this period here. So far, it's still looking constructive, but obviously we'll reassess based on what actually ends up playing out. Let me mark the 1236. That's always an important window, along with 1238. Mid-session usually occurs during this period here, so how did you guys do today? I know premiums were moving a little bit slow, but if you entered off 71.22 this morning, or even off 71.48, I still think that you still had a pretty good shot at this. Entries in this area here are super tough, especially with the way price is trading. Okay, so You really had to enter off the 7120s, 7130s, I think, to at least get like the most out of the trades today. What was the poll winner on that vote? Let me just put my username in here. What even is my Twitch username? Is it Miss Izzy Trades? Yeah, it is. Majority voted 71, 78, 71, 81. So technically you guys are wrong because they hit 71, 82. So, and I was kind of surprised that you guys voted for that as the majority, especially before mid-session. I was like, what? So can you guys guess what I voted for? What do you guys think I voted for? I'm also surprised you guys voted for that, considering what we discussed. Like, I was like, why? And it's not even mid-session. Had I asked you guys that, and it was after mid-session, and we hadn't hit 71, 81, then I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. But because it wasn't even mid-session yet, I was like, you guys are not even going to give it a shot? Like, we're still meeting price points on time. It's just in a very, 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 very slow way, but... So which area do you guys think has the most likely odds based on how this is breaking? By the way, our crypto analysis was insane this past week. This had that daily 3-bar like we talked about. This has also been a pretty good factor for ES in terms of also like the oil reversal here, but the Bitcoin 3-bar flag worked pretty well for anyone that was trading that. And that was off that 74K break that we talked about on Saturday. I did a stream on Saturday on this one, which I have some notes on for whoever wants them. I don't know who trades crypto in here, but 12:36 was the next window here. We'll see if we get this. Nice. Were you there for the stream on Saturday night? 71.84 being tested at exactly 12:36. So far, every single point in time and price has been accurate. 12:36 p.m., 71.84. All of this is keeping this intact. So I'm sure you guys could imagine what price point you'd want to trigger. Probably no later than 1:15, since 1:15 is the actual mid-session for the whole session versus real-time session. But during real-time, this would be the best points in time to clear. What price point do you guys think that is? Don't get this wrong. You guys actually can't get this wrong. If you get this wrong, this is the one time I'd probably be kind of upset if you guys did. Earlier, I'll let it go, but right now, I probably wouldn't let it go. What's the price point that you likely want to hit? Yeah, at least 71.88, I would say, or 87 at a minimum. Ideally, the 71.90. I don't know if we could hit 93 by this point, but like before 1 or 1:15. But hitting that area in there is what's going to give us the highest odds of continuation. Otherwise, could they end up making this a pinnable session this afternoon? And hey, I'm not one of those traders that takes away any odds. If I see odds and if my price points are met on time at exact price, then I keep my windows open. Okay, so technically speaking, we still have a shot at 71.93, 7,200 today. 72.20s, I don't know. I feel like even though this is a core-to-core break, technically we could get these spots today, but I don't want to overdo it. A lot of this is going to be based on what they do during this period here. Does that make sense? Like, what they do during this period is going to determine whether or not we can actually get full range today, which would be insane. I talked about this on Wednesday, and I said if I put this out there, I feel like a lot of people will just think I'm crazy, but technically speaking, like, if they enter the zone, then yes, you could end up getting, like, the full range. And remember, if they break 7188, that automatically puts us into another zone, which means potentially a 100-point break, right? Anyway, these were the targets we talked about on the 15th, and that's what triggers from 7132. So you can guess 7132 triggers 7188, which 7188 could trigger what? Especially on a core-to-core break. What could 7188 trigger? Basically this area here. Obviously the zone, right? So we won't fully take that away. I wonder how much range that is actually on the 2-day. On that 2-day, because you know how I said earlier this was 100, this was 256 points, and then if they extended, so right now they're hitting those 256 point intervals, okay? These are the 256 point intervals, you guys, by the way, off this 2-day. And they've already obviously hit the 416, 413. Overall range is getting very close to those spots that I talked about. Let me find them. They're on the report, but these areas here, okay? These are, so off the entire range so far from the 2-day 3-bar, they technically have hit these ranges. Let me just go back to this and see what the exact spots were. 778, so 778 points, which they've already done, but let's see, off open. Yep, even off open they've done that. It's basically the 426 times 2 is what we said, which are these spots. I did put these in the report. these are the full extensions of like 1,300 points, but we'll look at that another day. That's like the 7,378 and 88, which I'm not gonna look at that right now, but this is pretty accurate if you think about it. And this is when we'd start getting concerned. I just reposted them in the Discord because I think they are important, but where were those marks? This was a 692. Here, okay. Those are pretty big areas. Okay. And if we look at it off the actual lows. So I don't think it's entirely out of the question to get to those spots because we already talked about this, especially if they fully want to give the expansion range that we were looking at. Another way that you can look at this too is the 256 point extension. Remember how I said usually when you break you can get like 275, 290, that would be the same thing. 300 point breaks from here, guys, would be, which is half of that 256, 346. Remember I wrote on Sunday that if they start hitting like those 300 point intervals, this is how you could see the 70, 220s. And then obviously the bigger breaks would be to core. 6 or 7271 is 346 points. off. And the reason I'm measuring off this though is because of the time. It's not because of this random bar, you guys. It's because it's the 14th, okay? So just FYI. Okay? Off the 14th. Which... And then the timing aspect of it, you could align it with the 6th and 7th bar. Does that make sense? Off like a full 346 point break. But if they did the full expansion scenario, which is not 346 points, because we're working with 412, for initial starters 375, 410, 412, right? That's where these areas come into play. Does that make sense? You guys? Like, I know that these areas are insane. Like, I'm not saying that they're not, but I just want you guys to understand why. And remember how we talked about, like, if they push, like, 10, 20, 10, 13, 10, 22, you could start seeing ranges like this. These were the full expansion scenarios. If they fully clear, which, when you get zone-to-zone snaps, what does that usually mean? When they fully start clearing zones like that, what does that mean? And we talked about this yesterday. What's the whole basis of the theory? Which is why sometimes you can get like a full continuation. Why do you guys think that is? Right at mid-session too. You guys, 1245, 1248, 1241 mid-session. Getting the 71, 85, 86 test here. What's our goal for the 1248? Basically ahead of 115 would be the most ideal. What's the goal here? The session's mid-session is 1:15 p.m. The real-time mid-session is this period here. Yeah, that's what could give us those bigger expansion scenarios, basically. Did this help you guys stay in the trades despite how slow premiums were moving? Remember what I said earlier? Like, once they start clearing these marks here, and especially if they start doing it during mid-session, I think premiums will move a little bit better, which they have. I've noticed that even on the ones I bought off 71.48. But, and I'm very disappointed for those that voted 7181 as the high, by the way, especially before mid-session, after talking about how calculated 71, 88, and 93 is for like an hour. Okay. Why is that though, Eddie? Just out of curiosity too. Like, what factored into you selling? And where did you sell exactly? These are definitely good areas to cover, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that if you want to hold off for mid-session period, which is what I did, then go ahead. I did take off the 2 contracts, like I said earlier, though, when they tested 7.8, but I decided to hold the rest of that position, at least for the mid-session period, just to see if they can actually clear 7.8, 8.1, 8.4, 8.6. Yeah, you have to be comfortable with the sizing, I feel. If you guys made money today too, don't forget to give back or something, or do something this weekend. Even the 7-11s and 7-12s would now be in the money, technically. Should I put up another poll? Let's put up another poll. Max range for real-time session. 71. I just have to use the washroom, you guys. I'll leave the screen on, but I'm gonna have myself muted. Before I go, you guys, please vote on the poll. It's interesting to see what majority think, because remember, the way that people's emotions are kind of factor into how things could trade. So get your votes in. I only set it for 5 minutes. That should be enough time for me to get back from making coffee and using the washroom. Okay, I'm back. What did we do? I didn't really have any odds or many odds during this period, so I figured it's probably a good time to use the washroom. Majority voted 7208, 7210. So if you voted 7208, 7210, what would your conditions have to be for that to even be a probability, you think? Because you obviously have to have some conditions preset. You're not going to just randomly hit those price points. What do you guys think? What would your conditions have to be? You guys can hear me, right? I did unmute myself. Or are you guys just avoiding my question? Give me the conditions for those to actually be triggered today. In real time, because that question was based on real time. What? So far, some reductions between that 1245 and 1248 interval. I could even see the slight pullback here too off 1241. Why does it keep deleting the 1245? Overall reduction in range is... Was that the high? Yeah, it is. At least 4 to 4.5 points, which is probably around that 90 spot. Okay, so I'm going to keep quiet until at least one person gives me what your conditions have to be for that to even be a probability. Because so far right now, we've hit all core ranges. This is the top of core zones here at 71, 85, 86. But we haven't obviously entered the zone, hint, hint. So what would your conditions have to be for that to even be a potential probability? Think about what you're saying, Strikerman. Think about what you just said. 7188 by 3 p.m. So not triggering it at all until 3 p.m.? Why would that put you at a potential risk based on the structures we talked about earlier? We have massive bear side patterns that are formulated around 306, 310, 3. Well, just think about it. Like, what kind of pattern is this? Are you guys good with structure? Very, 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 very basic TA. You should know pattern recognition, okay? You could easily form a big reversal this afternoon if they don't clear, right? This looks like it could be a massive star reversal this afternoon. Do you understand the importance of breaking ahead of 306 at that point then? So it's not, and it's also based on like the calculated points in time. But what would be, you're talking about even getting to 720608. Like, there's no way you're going to do that if you haven't even triggered 7188, 7193. Does that make sense? Especially if you have massive structural risk for 3 o'clock. So you have to factor the 2 and 2 together. That would mean that you probably want to push during these periods here to avoid that. Or at the very least, if you can't push, you want to go back red. Okay? And maybe, and by red, I mean to make a bar. Maybe go into an inside bar, maybe flag. Does that make sense? So maybe consolidate the 7170s, 7180s, but hold 6566. It doesn't give you much room though, because you don't want to get back beneath 66. So you'd have to be basically between 66 and 86, which are what? What's 66 and 86? What areas are those? Core areas, right? This whole area here, above here, these are core ranges. It's roughly 17 points. So that could be a probability, but then you'd have to have very tight range for that duration of however long that is. That's how many minutes is that from now? From now until then, like that's a minimum of like 2 hours. Does that make sense? Like that would end up really burning majority of the premiums. Maybe leave for a late day extension, but I don't think that you could do that without even tagging 7188.93 like before 3, because your risk gets increased, especially if you stay around these ranges. Does that make sense? You'd have to immediately take it out then at these points in time to negate that probability from happening. Or another scenario that could happen is if they just stay around here, but then, and they don't break, but then they push right at 306, 310, 312, take out the high, that it could still end up being not a bearish pattern, but it could be bearish in the sense that they could engulf. Does that make sense? So like if they took it out after 3 o'clock, they could still come back down and make an engulfing pattern, which basically just leaves like risk back down to like 7166, 7168, 7171. That would make it pinnable at core ranges. Does that make sense? At 7171, 7178, 7173, those basically those areas that we just discussed earlier. Do you guys understand the different scenarios? It's very, very, very important to understand scenarios and how they could play out based on time and structure, okay? So them staying around here but not triggering here, that's a perfect example of they kept it higher but didn't take it high enough, right? Them taking it back to 7475 is good, but it's not low enough, okay? They would have to take it a bit lower but hold 66668. Do you understand why getting these ranges at least almost immediately can reduce some of the risk that you face at 3? I don't know if you guys know how structures work is the thing. Structure is probably one of the most important things in trading because it helps you understand like what kind of probabilities you could have. Obviously, if they kept pulling this or pushing this, okay, then, you know, like then it's not really going to form a nasty star like that. It's going to push up and you have a lot less odds of getting a structural reversal at 3 o'clock. Do we have any catalyst at 3 for them to do anything crazy this afternoon? I didn't see anything. Well, these points were our mid frames though at 135, 36, 38, 41. So either way, we're still going to keep a close eye on that. But does that help you guys understand how they could position this into the close a little bit? I hope it does. I don't know if it does or doesn't, but I ran out of pods and I just have these vanilla ones and I don't like flavored coffee, so I'm like forcing myself to drink this. So, that being said, give me the conditions you'd want to meet to actually have odds of getting the 7,200, 7,208 like you guys voted for. So far, it's not looking as probable based on two things. One, they haven't even triggered 7188, and two, they didn't do it during the real-time mid-intervals here. Yes, there's still a window. The window for today is more closely calculated to the 136, 141 period, which is why there could be some extensions here this afternoon. The actual sessions mid-session is not until 1:15. That could also be a contributing factor. But I think once we hit this point in the day, if we haven't at least reached these areas, then we could probably say with confidence that they're likely already starting to max out ranges for the session today. Do you guys agree? The only thing that would work against you right now in terms of a short is not really price, I guess, because it's not even that much range, even if they broke, but it's more so the timing aspect that's coming up. So I would say off 71, 85, 84. Those are some pretty good spots. And it's probably not a bad idea to actually hedge against any remaining longs that you guys might have, especially off these areas here too, because these are very big spots. And like I mentioned earlier too, you definitely want to start de-risking, specifically if they don't start clearing around the mid-session, which is here. Nice job on that short. That has to be news on that stick. And that's a range reduction stick, guys. So whatever implied range they have on that stick is likely where they're wanting to reduce that odd for the session today. So like the ranges in terms of getting to the 7200s, that takes it. This is very similar actually to yesterday's session. And I think the big factor that came into play here was us not triggering 71, 87, 88, 91 during this period. That was one of the biggest conditions. How many points in range is that candle? 11 points. I just want to see if overall reductions here are 17 points. That's kind of what we were talking about earlier, the 17-point ranges. I would bet anything that they equal around this 7202. Yeah, they do. That, see? That volatility of failing to clear during this period here, like you can see it, and that's why I didn't think it was a huge probability based on them. Alexis, it's okay if you don't know, but 71.88, 71.93 is huge, right? So is mid-session, obviously. So for them to get those ranges in real time, it would be virtually impossible if they can't clear that area during that specific period. Does that make sense? There's still some time for them to negate this, which is what makes it a bit more interesting, but I would still be a little bit cautious here just because obviously the volatility has increased, specifically with them getting it back beneath these ranges here. So we'll see if they can get, there is the odds that open up at the 115. 115 is the session's mid-session. This 136 to 141 period was the median between, I think, our 1208 and our 306, 312. I haven't measured between the mid-session though and those points in time. If someone wants to do that, you can go ahead. I think it was a good call covering some though and having some exposure short on the stalls at 1245. The fact that they stalled at exactly 1245 too is actually impressive if you think about it, because that's the real time's mid-session. So the only other point in time I would measure here would be R45 and here, this period here. I'm not sure what that median is, but just want to see something. They're just before 2 o'clock. So what do you guys think, real quick? Do they negate this downside? They already obviously very clearly reduced the range by 17 points. So range reduction of 17 points. The only thing that is working in their favor is that they held above 6.8. Okay, we said that if they bring it back beneath 6.6, 6.8, that's where volatility could heavily increase. What's another factor that could come into play here? Which is actually the biggest factor that could come into play here. What do you guys think that is? This is probably where the session becomes a lot trickier for most people. What's the one factor that could come into play here? Aside from a 6.8 hold. So market makers made it clear that they want to reduce range and avoid getting... So what's the one thing that's coming into play right here? Specifically now and over the next 10, 15, 30 minutes. Yeah, time. So we have mid-session coming up here for the session at 1:15, and then we have the period between 1:30, 1:36, 1:41, and some extensions through 1:54 and 2 o'clock that I just noticed based off that 12:45 stall in the 306 window That could obviously put us at that volatility risk. What do they have to do during this period? You guys think? Think about it. What did they have to do initially before? Especially off these calculated times. Okay, look at the 1208. That was calculated. This point here. Okay, so was the 1209. They probably have to get it back at least over like the 71.75. It would be the same exact thing where they'd have to come back and clear 71.78. Otherwise, that risk is going to increase if they take it back beneath that 7168, 7166. This is the mid-session today, but the times of day today are closer to this period here. Okay? I'm going to watch the 124 and 130 period too, just because I normally watch those times, but... Let me reset some of these. Oops. I think it was a good call for me rolling out my contracts into Monday earlier. And then covering the bit off those 710s. Well, the issue with this is, remember how we were saying earlier, like if they break it back beneath 6.6, this is like where volatility can increase. I'm seeing that same sort of theme that we talked about earlier too, with like the, even this right here, like roughly 2 points. Same with this here. Do you see what I'm saying? Like they're kind of keeping it just above, just below on each end. And that's what creates that back and forth volatility like we're seeing right now. Because you're not going to get progressive price action until one end breaks. Okay? Continued price action, I mean. So on the downside, it's this area here, like we talked about. On the upside, does that make sense? And they basically stalled 8.6 and then held 6.8. I do think it's important, though, that you guys at least de-risk, like, majority of your positions, though. Or you should have anyway off our 71.80 targets, because I was mainly looking for 71.88.92 today as, like, a potential max range. That's what I had voted on. And a lot of it was relative to what they did during mid-session here, which they clearly stalled. I took a short hedge when they stalled at 7175 off that 115 interval. We'll see if they can have continuation here. I just feel like it's worth at least having some sort of a hedge since I still have some contracts from the 7122 point this morning. $71.68 being taken out and 6.4 being tested. This is what can accelerate the short, you guys. They also formed a really nice 3-bar pattern. So 4th bar would be the next minute here. So see if they try holding 6.4. This in itself, though, is increasing volatility. Just the fact that they even triggered beneath 6.4, okay? Because that's what you needed in the first place to get these kind of clearance breaks back here. This is what opens up basically odds of getting back to retest the bottom of the means, which is closer to 7152, 49, kind of like this range here. And this is what we talked about earlier. Like if it's at that point, they're better off taking this red. Remember what I was saying earlier? So that maybe they could flag this in the second half of the session versus having a massive reversal. This was the scenario we talked about earlier. Because if they take this down, then and then still have enough time to take it back up. Okay. But if they want to keep that in that box range, then you don't really want to break either end at that point. Does that make sense? Because with ranges like that, if you want this to end up flagging, unfortunately, you'd have to have a lot of back and forth price action here. So let's just put our 61, 64, and 52 area. This is basically a battle within the means. If you had something like that all the way through until 3, you would be stuck in these ranges. And that's the only way that you would benefit. Does that make sense? So it doesn't, that's not really the best for price action. They could obviously immediately negate this because they have that window coming up. Does that make sense? That would be the only way that they could negate that scenario from panning out, is during this window here. And the conditions would be the exact same conditions we had earlier. You'd have to get back over 71.75. You'd have to clear 71.78. It's the same thing, kind of rinsed and repeated again. This is the hardest part of the day, so let's do a poll, because this is the part that they're trying to determine just how much range is left, what they want to do with structures, and whether or not they want to clear by the calculated midpoints, which are closer to like 136, 141 today. So let's see. Odds. Retrace 71, 78, 71, 81 by the 130. Well, it's not letting me rate it, but 136 window. Break back beneath to 71.50. 71.55. Fully retrace 71.83, 71.85. Fully break down. That's another failure stick. This is very similar to what they did here. I don't know if anyone joined on the short hedge. I felt like that was probably the better decision based on what they did there. They're doing exactly what they did here. Basically to limit that odd again, just ahead of this period of time. It's actually almost the same time intervals too that they're doing it in. Nice. Yeah, at this point the short contracts are paying off, which really helps if you still have any exposure long. I bet these ranges now, how much range is in that stick? 20 points? 19? That's probably at least 32, 34 points. Yeah, it is. That's a full 34 point range, you guys. That's insane. These are probably around the 72-20s. Yeah, they are. So do you see the kind of odds that they reduce for the session? It's not just about seeing the reversals and things that could come in. It's about understanding, I guess, like the kind of range that they're avoiding getting to, right? So kind of like the earlier point was avoiding getting to 70, 7202, 7208. This bull reduction is fully avoiding any odds of 70. And that kind of gives you an idea if you had cleared 7188, 7192. That's the kind of PA that you could have seen. How many think that they'll try holding the line off 71, 51, 52 during this interval here? So this point in time is aligned with these points here. What do you guys think? I think this is where they'd have to make a decision, because like I said, they could still technically flag this, but that also could end up being an engulfing kind of pattern. And this is the median point in time, so could you imagine if they fully engulf that back down to yesterday's, like basically back to 7100? That would be insane. But a lot of this is based on what they do during this period, since this time is correlated to that 305, 306, 308, okay? So if they want to keep this afloat, they would have to definitely sustain the 71, 49, 52 spots that I mentioned earlier. And specifically off these points in time, a reversal down to 7130s would only be the case because remember, our 72, our 7120s and 30s pinnable spots, this area here for us, especially on a core stall. These are core areas. This is top of core. This is a core area, right? So these areas here, okay, are linked to this area here, okay? So that could happen, but I would say it depends on how high or how low they retrace and when they do it by. So if they retrace back over to, I would say at least this range in here, like the 7.8, 7.5, then probably not. Does that make sense? But like if they can't even get back over 7.1, let's say, then yes, especially 6.4, 6.6, 6.8, because this is the area that you needed to have that short continuation to begin with. So you had to lose 6.6, 6.4, 6.8. Yeah. And we have our intervals coming up here that are directly correlated with those 3 o'clock periods. So we'll see. Having a challenge is not bad. It's good to have a challenge at this point of the day. Does this aspect make sense? So far they're holding 5.152, which was our first short target on the failure of 6.6, 6.8. Okay. And they held off that 124 interval. I don't know why this keeps deleting things. That candle was at 124. I normally watch 130 anyway, so it's not a calculated time today, but we can watch it. 124, 130 are generic flips. So I feel like if they can at least retract 6.4 as early as this point, then it likely makes it a lot more probable that they can trigger these retests, okay, of 7.1 by these points in time. Does that make sense? you guys. Because 6466 is what put us at risk in the first place to get down to 5-1. But they'll do it in increments. So 7166, like I said earlier, takes you to 7151. There's a buffer around 48 and 51, but 51 would be the better support. Whether or not they get this back over 716668, I would say at least over 71 though. By that 136, 141 window is what's going to determine if they want to back test these lows or not. Okay? Because again, this point in time is linked to this. Okay? Real quick, guys, because this could be a volatile period coming up here. How many think that they could retract back over 7175? Which is a pretty big reversal back up, I would say. There were some extensions around 154, 56, and 2. And 80 would be very hard. They'd have to have news or something. They'd also have to have pretty progressive sticks at least around that 135, 36. Like so far this to me, tagging 6-4 but not breaking, that doesn't look progressive to me. But I would say pressure's definitely increasing, especially as this window approaches, because could this be the window that they backtest 7152, especially on a failure of 716664? These points here. And that's what could continue that downside pressure. This is basically the deciding window here, I would say, for how the rest of the session is going to end up panning out. And it makes sense because these are calculated spots. Well, these are still not bad spots, so don't get too biased just yet, because there's still a lot of time left in this session, and they haven't really broken major range yet. I would say maybe on a breaks back beneath 7149, that's when it starts to increase a little bit higher, because getting back into the channel would completely destroy price action for the rest of the session today. Like getting back into this beige box right here. The means usually implies what? So 50s, 60s. What does that typically imply? So I would say between 7151 and 66. What kind of price action do the means usually imply? Just from base theory. Right? What's the biggest factor of trading in the means? This is the most common area to see what? And in general, this is not specific to today. This is my theory that I made up. But usually the means triggers volatility. Okay? Because it's typically in between hitting an area of like core ranges, which they hit top core ranges here at 8.6, and basically stalled into getting into a new zone, and then kind of the decisive point between the channel. And every single time we trade in a means, I swear, this is always the PA that happens, or it's always an area that you can see increased volatility in. 135 retesting the 7158. I'm just going to clear the chart because I'm kind of like watching this without anything on it, especially at crucial points here. I think the actual time was 137, but I'm going to watch the 136 window anyway. So what do you guys think? Which end do you think triggers here? During this window? And they've made it quite clear. So this area right here is kind of like right in between. Whereas this area is what would trigger that continued volatility. And the window was, it was roughly around this window here, so we'll see. They did a really good job of holding 5-1 though. They know exactly what they're doing because they knew that breaking 5-1 would have continued that downside. They also knew exactly what they were doing by retesting 6-4 but then stalling. So market obviously knows what kind of risk factors are in right now. I'm going to mute myself for a second here just while I focus on this because I also need to decide what I'm going to do with some of this short position. I had a feeling they would do that because of the fact that they triggered 8586, they held 5-1, and they still tagged 6-4. Okay, so had they not done that, I would have said with certainty that they would have probably taken this out, but they kept this odd open. Okay, 716450 at exactly 1:37 p.m. You guys, that's extremely calculated because that kind of resets those conditions again. We'll see just how much they can retract back up. Like I said, I feel like they need at least 6-6, 6-8, ideally 7-1, which I feel like is still quite a bit, but at least 6-8. And then there was that extension window through 154 and 155 just before 2 and just after 2. I feel like the only way that they could extend this is if they get this back over 6-6, 6-8. Otherwise, that downside still stays at risk. Do you see how calculated this is, though? Like, they know exactly what they're doing. And this is what makes it a little bit harder to trade. So I took a tiny bit more of the short off when I noticed that they were holding the line, okay? And these trades are pretty hard because they can be a little bit more difficult to trade, and you have to be very precise, which is a hard thing to do sometimes, especially if you're managing both a long and a short, because obviously you want to capture both ends of the trade. And I don't think 6-4 is enough to negate this. This needs over 6-6, 6-8. And I don't even think that that would be a negation. That would just be to stabilize it, if that makes sense. And that would probably put it in that choppy window we talked about where they could end up just kind of doing this. Remember how I said they could do this afternoon until 3? All right, what do you guys think? 141 was the next window, I'm pretty sure. Do you guys think that they'll clear 71.6450? Just say yes or no. I don't want to put up a poll. Pretty sure this was the next window. I had it deleted, but... Yeah, and it's not even bulls. I just feel like to stabilize, that 212, 211 minute chart is basically stuck. I'll show you guys something interesting here in a second too. I'm noticing something, but I'll show you guys once this 4-1 stick here happens. Let me reset this too so I know what these frames were. I'm pretty sure it was this frame. There's two things I'm paying attention to here. So no retest of 6-4, but then to see if they still sustain this 5-7, 5-8. Does that make sense? Like those same areas I mentioned earlier. Remember how I said there was some calculated spots around the 61, 59. These areas here kind of increased risk a little bit. I just wanted to see if they're at least trying to sustain those bars there, because then that could still entail for an extension, but it could make the price action a little bit choppier. And I could also be off by another minute or two, but I need to use the washroom. So far, they're keeping this within that 210, 212 minute window, which ends up burning premiums really. Because don't forget that also these, let's see, the 225 is 250. This is linked with high of day. Okay, that puts us at pretty big risk up until 250. So this is where there's some conflicting patterns here, okay? And then if you extend wider, you can kind of see the same thing. Do you see this? These are directly correlated with those high of days. 328. Okay, these are pretty nasty star reversals. What's the 563? Oh, this one doesn't flip till... This is interesting because this is also linked to highs, but this keeps us stuck until session close. That would be the worst case scenario, which would just keep us pinnable in these ranges, guys. So that wouldn't really give either end. That would just kind of keep us within these box ranges. So let's mark those times, because those are some nasty looking structures. What did I say it was? 25. And I think it was 329. No, 328. Those are linked with these points here. We could probably even see the stalls at 1251, 1252, which those are probably linked to like those 87 minutes that we were talking about earlier. 87, 88, 89. I think these ones flip a little bit earlier, closer to like 218. So my thoughts would be if they negate some of these smaller structures like this, okay, and like this, specifically before that 2 p.m. period, because I feel like this area here is where this would expand. Do you see what I'm saying? But then they need this back over the 71, 69, 77, 78. It kind of just neutralizes risk. These are some of the harder patterns to read because they're conflicting. And then some of them could stay stuck until close. That is what can ruin odds for both sides. Does that make sense? You guys, off highs. So like the 563 minute, okay? That could keep us range bound until close, especially if neither end breaks. What are the ends that have to break? Let's see if you guys were listening. What ends have to break for progressive price action to be made on either end? They're on the chart, but I'm asking you guys. What ends have to break for them to have progressive price action? So for bears, what do they need? And bulls, what do they need? And then to keep odds alive for being stuck, what do you need? 65, I think, is too low. I feel like that keeps you stuck. So I would say 6-4, 6-5, 6-6, 6-8, 7-1 keeps us stuck, okay? Bulls need 7-8. Bears need probably beneath 5-1, 4-9. Does that make sense? And if you look at it from like even where they close, like lowest closing point versus opening point, you could probably use like a 7 to 6 point range. You need at least 6 or 7 points above or below. Anything beneath this is not really, this area here probably keeps you stuck. Okay. This area here I think could increase odds, but it's not the highest odds. Okay, like 7-1. This area here I think gives you the better odds for bulls to actually have some sort of control. Whereas this area here, you're playing with fire. This area here, you're likely to expand downside. Does that make sense? And it should lead you back to 7-1, 5-1, 5-2, 4-2, 4-4, 4-8. Does this help you guys? In terms of seeing this from like a structural break? Especially since we have a lot of odds during these periods of time here too. So I didn't want to completely take away all odds just because I don't think that that's the best way of looking at this. And especially now that they're coming back to the 7-1 mark. So we did say that there were some periods around 148, 154, 155. I still, again, I don't think that these are enough ranges to give like full odds of bull side. This just neutralizes things, which is what keeps us stuck. That's what would make it into a pinnable session, which I know you guys don't want to hear, but okay, so kind of like here. This area here starts to help odds a little bit. This area here, I would say, really increases odds of getting some more traction from bulls. It's basically back to our 7-3, 7-4, 7-5. 7-8 is the better area, but I think 7-3 to 7-5 is probably enough. Whereas these areas here keep bear odds pretty high. Okay. So it's kind of a way of breaking down specific price zones into structural and price behavior and how it could basically act. Okay, so again, bears need what? I don't think 55 is enough for bears. That's not true. Bears probably need closer to 44 and 51. Okay, bulls probably need at least 7-1, 7-3 to 7-1, 7-5. This doesn't even give you odds of getting like new highs, but it gives you odds of at least retesting highs, okay? 7-1, 7-8 plus is best for odds to retest highs and take them out or make progressive highs, okay? New highs. 7-1 neutral, so this is where both ends basically lose, aka pinnable. I would say would stay stuck between 7-1, 5-5, 7-1, 5-8, 7-1, 7161, 7164, 7166, 7168, 7171. Does that make sense? I really have to use the washroom, but to me that makes a lot of sense. And I think the fact that they broke this at 137, like I said earlier, this could still give it that extension to this period here. And like I had mentioned before, 7-1 would be the break. I'm not sure if they can get the full break to 7-5, 7-4, but this is basically where market makers are going to determine what kind of odds they want to put on for 3 o'clock. Okay? And whether they want to continue some downside odds for 218 and 250, because there's still quite a few bear structures that have formed, and them neutralizing this right here is reducing those odds of those continuing, because those are pretty big patterns that formed on the downside. Okay. All right, I tried my best to get back before this window. Um, I hate sessions like this when they end up turning into basically it's a lot of work for like not very much range. You know what I'm? Do you get what I'm saying? You kind of have to work extra hard, and the reward doesn't really seem very high. So I will probably stick around for the whole set. Oh, you know what? I have a I have an eye appointment today. Oh my god, and I forgot, and it's literally at 12. 1 second. I have an eye exam at literally 12:30, and it's 12 o'clock, and I forgot. Uh-oh. I should probably reschedule that. I thought about doing it this morning, then I forgot. I know. Did you guys notice that the 156 how they reclaimed 6-8 final seconds? They do that basically to give like the continued extensions. But this is basically the kind of PA that I would have definitely expected at these ranges here. This is a misleading arrow because 7-1 doesn't really, it's not really bull odds. That's kind of like a neutralized odd. It is frustrating because it doesn't really give you a whole lot of room. I'm gonna have to shut the session off, you guys, because I need to try getting hold of this optometrist. Because I don't want to just no-show. That's not very nice. And I completely forgot. And if I can't reschedule it, I don't know. I don't have time to get dressed and go, but let me at least try calling them. You know how yesterday these areas became extremely pinnable, specifically off 70.51 hold and 70.56.55 retracement? This is almost the exact same scenario where they just basically kept it pinnable. And if you think about it, this is basically the same thing. It's just 100 points higher, but that's typically when they keep it within a 22 and 17 point interval. And that's what they ended up doing all afternoon yesterday until they finally broke the 17 point range right here. So if we use kind of the same concepts today, they're probably stalling 17 points right here. Yes, they are. Does that make sense, you guys, from like the stall? And they probably need at least over 23 points to get the break. So this makes total sense. It's basically the exact same PA, unfortunately, as yesterday with pinnable ranges, which I know you guys don't like hearing. So that concludes the 7168 would also be the 17 point break. And remember, they reduced us by 34 points, right? So what's 17.25 times 2? That should take you back to highs. Do you guys see the alignment here? And that was the overall range that they reduced us by today too, which is pretty sad, but it happens. I think I'm going to end the session, guys, because I do have to try getting a hold of this doctor, and there's a chance I might still have to go into that appointment if they decide that they can't get me in this weekend or something. But if I don't have to go in, I'll probably be back on around that 306, 309, 3. Make sure you guys have these times marked, because these are very important points in the day today. Okay, along with like the 246, 250 period. There was odds for bears to continue at between 218 and 250, specifically if they don't retract above 6871. Okay, so far odds are starting to reduce for bears, but they haven't really progressed too much above 68. So I mean, to me, I think that this kind of neutralized the session, but again, there's still a lot of time left until 3 o'clock, so they could just be delaying things too. Okay, I'll let you guys know on Discord if I'm gonna stream the 3 p.m.